Hello, you dirty potters. I want to show you guys how to make crochet bowls. Now, some people call them crochet bowls and some people call them yarn bowls. I choose to call them crochet bowls because the majority of the people that I hang around with that actually use yarn bowls call them crochet bowls, so it's just in my regular vernacular. But this is what a crochet bowl looks like, and I don't make surprisingly awesome good ones. I'm not an expert at making crochet bowls, but I will say they're difficult to make. Now, you're an intermediate student now. You've probably gone through the gambit of beginner class and you moved up one level. Congratulations, you're a person now. But what's that? Well, what's that guy making over there? You shift your gaze over to some guy in the corner making holes in his bowl and you go, why would he be doing that? It's no longer a vessel form, it's no longer functional. Why would he do that? You go up to him and he has the sharpest knife known to man and he's just drilling holes and carving out and smoothing out little bits of this bowl. For some unbeknownst reason to you, you have no idea what's going on. You go up to him and you politely ask, by the way, you do it politely because you're part of the Dirty Potter Nation now, and we might cuss a little bit, but we're always gentlemen and gentle ladies. And most likely he or she is gonna go, oh, it's a yarn bowl because I or someone that I know is a crocheter or a yarn artist or some type of something else that rhymes with the word crochet. Imagine you're a crochet or a yarn artist and you don't know where to put that giant ball of yarn that you bought on discount from Walmart, and you want to put it down and it's on the ground and you're crocheting, it's flying everywhere, it's rolling off the table, one of your more than one cats. I don't know why, but everyone that I've ever met that likes to do yarn or crochet has a cat. I don't know, please, if you're someone who is a crocheter or a yarn artist, please let me know. Please comment down below like, I'm a yarn artist, I am the exception to the rule, I don't have more than one cat. And don't play that game with me where you're like, well, I have 2 cats in my house, but one is my mom's cat. Okay, you have 2 cats. You take care of 2 cats. I'm sure it's just a correlation fallacy because I noticed something that is current with all the people that I'm friends with as far as potters go. It's not so much that like they definitely do, it's just the one that I see do, so I would like to see proof of someone who doesn't have that. Anyway, we got off topic, I'm sorry. Again, let's imagine you're a yarn or a crochet artist and this ball goes everywhere. What you can do is you can get the ball, put it inside of the bowl, string the string through here, which already has an upward kind of curve, it's already going towards the y-axis, and then just the string comes here and the ball just rolls around in here. It doesn't move. But there's a couple things you need to know to make sure the ball doesn't move. And I'm not saying this from a yarn artist's point of view or a crochet artist's point of view, I'm saying this from a potter's point of view. Your bowl can't be light, is number one. Yarn bowls are really, really hard to make by machines, and they cost a little bit more money in production because technically it's really hard to get this exacto and the certain symmetry, and even if you do, then you have mass production of yarn bowls. I'm not saying there's none out there, but I'm saying that it's very difficult to find them. So the majority of the ones you see are gonna be ones that are handmade by artists. By the way, you guys will notice I put a lot of this swirl at the bottom of my pots. This is usually known as the potter's swirl. Usually, production potters or people who just want to identify their work as handmade do this simply because most machines can't do this. So if you ever see a bowl with this design at the bottom, either a machine got real good at it or you're working with handmade stuff there. Not to say that potters always put this in here, but this is kind of a potter thing. I won't go as far as to say it's part of potter culture, but I will go as far as to say as within the culture of pottery, I noticed that a lot of people do this swirl, specifically to give it some flavor or to identify it as, hey, this is handmade. You can tell it's handmade because machines don't do this. There's a couple of things you want to keep in mind when you're throwing the bowl to your shape. And keep in mind, you just want to start off with throwing a bowl. I'm putting this in the intermediate section because you should already know how to throw a bowl. But this one gets a little more complicated. This one gets a little bit more complicated because you have to learn how to make your bowl thick and a certain design. You're learning now how to make your stuff a little more functional or for specific uses. There's like 10 different ways you could take a piece off of the wheel, but I suggest you throw it on a bat because you want this thing to be completely and utterly symmetrical. That is the first thing. The second thing is I'm being kind of a dick because I am throwing this with porcelain, and porcelain is not really what you want to throw it with. You want to throw it with something with grog because at the end of the day, when you put this inside the kiln, this is going to end up fluxing a little bit, and if it doesn't, you're either real good at math and making self-supporting curvature to the point where it doesn't move in over 1,000 degree temperatures, or it's not made of porcelain. The reason for this is because this doesn't have as much grog in it, and grog is just the weird term us potters use, or I mean most people use, but you're gonna see it in the potter world a lot. Grog is just little rocks that help keep the stability of the clay, and I don't have time to go into what grog actually is because the process is actually fascinating. But for the benefit of this video, I'm just gonna let you know they're little rocks. And if you're trying to build something very tall, it's easier to do it with grog in it because these are the little building blocks and rocks that'll keep it bound together. I mean, for your beginner one, you wanna make sure this is not porcelain. This is porcelain. You wanna make sure it's probably not porcelain. It's very, very difficult, and most potters actually don't know how to make their thing not flux. It's a series of little tricks along the way that you'll learn, just so that you make sure it doesn't flux. The tricks include leaving the negative space in there before you fire it, and tipping it upside down, as well as putting extra clay in there to make sure it doesn't move. The third tip is you want to make sure it's a little bit thick. This isn't just a trick with making sure that this thing doesn't move, because the thicker it is, it'll probably move a little bit less. But that's not to say that if you make it super thick, it'll be fine. No, it won't. This has to weigh something. It has to hold the yarn in place. If somebody puts yarn in here and they're pulling it out and the bowl starts to move with it, es no bueno. You want this bowl to be as stable as possible, which is why this looks like a much thicker form than it usually is. This thing right here is not super heavy, but it's also not super light. You really want this to stay in place. If you're a yarn or a crochet artist and you put your yarn in here and you start pulling, you start knitting, and you're way over there, and it's way over here on the table, and it starts moving with you, it's gonna fall off the table and break, of course. If one of your 7 cats doesn't get to it first. I know a lot of potters, and I was one of those potters at one time that I insisted that everything be nice and thin and symmetrical and weigh almost nothing, and then I started to get into the actual feel of the work versus how it looks, and I prefer my pots to be a little bit on the heavier side. Not heavy as in like, wow, this bowl's 5 pounds. Heavier as in I want it to have some weight to it in comparison to its size. And the fantastic thing about yarn bowls is that they don't have to be food safe whatsoever. No one's eating out of a bowl with holes in it. I mean, there's a couple weirdos out there, but like, and the awesome thing is that no one's eating out of these bowls. Technically, you can use glaze with lead or barium or whatever you want in it just because it's not a food safe item because it's not meant to eat off of. When you give it to somebody, there's an unknown contract of clearly you're not gonna eat off of a bowl with holes in it, right, bro? I'd be messed up, you see him in the street next week and he's just like, what? Bro, I love this bowl with holes in it. There's a little slot here. I just, like, all food comes right out. It's great. But you're probably not gonna meet that guy. So the throwing the actual bowl part is quite easy. Throw it on a bat, preferably not make it porcelain, and make sure it's nice and symmetrical, and also make sure it has a little bit of weight to it. After that, here comes the real difficult part. Please, 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 I'm asking you very, very nicely, once I show you how to do this, and if you don't know how to do this beforehand, please don't be that person who puts them on Etsy with faces of cats and dogs on them and then sells them for $40 each. Oh, they're not even well crafted. They're just like bowls with cats and dogs on them. Oh, it hurts so bad. And the even better part about these bowls is that technically, while this one's trimmed right here, you don't have to trim the bottom at all if you don't feel like it, because you're trying to make it bottom heavy in the first place, so it stays in place. So this is amazing, because you literally cut your work in half. Well, not really, because you're gonna have to circumvent all that work to another portion of work, which is carving, so good luck. Now here's what you're gonna need for this deal, alright? You're gonna need a sharp knife. I don't mean a potter's knife. I really mean something that is sharp, like a really sharp edge, scalpel-ish type of knife. It doesn't matter what you use, even if you want to use a switchblade, go ahead, but make sure it's sharper than a damn potter's knife. And you don't have to have this second tool, but it benefits you a lot to have a hole maker. I have a small one, and I have a big one, specifically for making the actual crochet curvature hole, and then I have one for making extra holes just in case they don't want to use that, because hell, they might find another space comfortable, and I'm trying to make it more versatile for them. You're also going to want a good quality sponge. Now, I prefer elephant ear sponges because it's a lot tougher. I prefer tougher sponges because they don't give out as often. That being said, for this project specifically, I prefer to use a finishing sponge and I prefer to use the white one from Mud Tools. But I don't know where that is, so we're gonna have to use this elephant ear sponge right here. And of course you're gonna need a bucket of water. You don't really need a bucket of water, you just need a source of water from somewhere. I prefer to use hot water because I got little baby back hands. Well, now just for this part, this is essentially already done. I do have to wipe this down a little bit to make it nice and clean, of course, because we're not savages. But it's a good idea at this point to get some type of towel or something that is nice and soft to put your piece on. Simply because you're going to be working on this and it's going to be tilted outside at one point. and at the point at which you're carving, it's not going to be extremely bone dry. So you're going to want something soft for it to lay upon. Now just a disclaimer, this is the way I do my crochet bowls. I'm not saying you have to do it this way, but this is the way that I feel most comfortable doing mine. Firstly, I get my big hole maker, right? And then I decide, okay, where do I want my hole? I'm going to say I want it right about here. Now for me, I usually put it somewhere at the half point in between the top and the bottom. I don't usually put it down here because that means that's more space for this to come down here and flex out this way. And I don't put it up here because that's not enough space to actually go to the symmetry of the bowl. So I usually pick somewhere along the middle. Let's say right here. You're going to stick this thing in and you're going to twist like this. Then you're just going to twist outwards and this right here will be left in there. You're going to want to take this stuff out right here. This is going to ruin the next person who uses it. Now, if you don't have one of these, it's really, really simple to just take one of these and use it. That being said, you can only make as big of a hole as there is a knife. So that being said, you're gonna have to take this here and just go ahead and twizzle it around like this. The reason I like making holes with the hole maker a lot better is simply because it's a lot cleaner. This hole here is not as clean as this hole here. It's a much easier process. Now I have to turn this around, go the other side, and scrape this off. And then I gotta go back inside here to get the excess clay out, and it's just a big hassle. So if I were you, I would suggest just getting a regular hole maker. Once I'm done with this initial hole right here, I'm gonna go ahead and start making my lines. So I'm gonna start, let's say, right here, and I'm gonna make an inward curve. Now some people like to trace before they do. For example, some people will do this, right? And you're gonna wanna go to the top of this hole right here. Then you're going to want to go ahead and pick another line and start making the other line like this. I'm not too good at drawing, please forgive me. This to me is much too big of a curve. So I'm simply going to round this out and it'll probably look a lot more natural later on. But I kind of want it to taper down. I want this to be a lot smaller than this is up here, this space here, the negative space I suppose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to redraw that with not good hands. There, that's fine with me. I'm gonna start from the inside of this right here with my sharp knife, and remember it's smooth enough to the point where I can just do this. Some people start from the top, I start from the bottom. It's a good idea to hold this in place right here while you do this, and put your thumb as close to the blade as you can without hurting yourself, of course, simply so you can get the most power and pressure. And that space is now done. Then you're going to go ahead and do the other space over here. Boop. Once all this is done, you can simply take this part out. Not difficult at all. But you're going to want to keep this because this is the same dryness as this, and this can just go in here to keep the negative space so that it won't flex in the kiln. I'm not saying it's guaranteed that it won't flex, I'm saying that it helps a lot though. After this portion, go ahead and take the back part of your knife and just scrape all these little boogers off. You want this to be extremely smooth. The reason being is that yarn is technically just little fibers meshed together, right? So this is going to catch on anything that you leave on your bowl, especially if you're using porcelain or some type of heavily grogged clay instead of just a medium body clay. So we're going to go ahead and smooth this out now. The main thing that I want to stress to you is that you need to get rid of this little knife curve right here and round this off, and you need to make this completely smooth. And while we're here, we might as well make the other two holes. I like to make mine way over here, and I like to make mine a little bit of a pattern. So we're going to put one right here, right? And of course we're going to take this part out here, and then we're going to put one up here so we make kind of a trifecta effect. We got 1, 2, 3 holes. This hole is going to stay small. And just to boot, we're going to put a little bit of twizzle twazzle here, a little bit of twizzle twazzle there. And we're just going to call that a day. Now I'm going to fast forward it so you guys don't have to go through the painstaking process of watching me smooth this out for Okay, now this is pretty much done now, but you guys probably noticed this bottom part here kind of sucked. We're just gonna go ahead, get this, tip it upside down very carefully, right? Put it right here, and we're just gonna end up smoothing the majority of this out. Now for this job, I'm just gonna get a big ass sponge. Now that we're done, of course, you're gonna go ahead, put your initials on it. Right, there you go. And we're going to very carefully take it over to the drying shelf. Now, I was talking to you guys earlier about just putting something inside this to make sure that it doesn't move. And remember, we kept that negative space, right? So, if you want to, you don't have to, but if you want to, you can take the negative space of this and jam it right back inside so that it fits perfectly, and go ahead and tuck it a little bit in there, like jam it in there. Reason for this is so it doesn't flux in the kiln or it doesn't flex in the kiln. Usually what will happen is that this will end up a little bit over there or over here or inwards or flex somewhere else, and then it'll just ruin the whole bowl. This right here helps it stay in place. Not only does this, but drying it upside down helps a lot too. Tipping it upside down works a little bit too, because if you rest it on the top part of the piece, this is going to stay completely symmetrical to the ground, right, or whatever it's resting on. So now you can just make sure that that stays even. But if it dries like this, there's somewhat of a chance that the wind might be blowing weird, or it might be a little bit strange in your studio, so this might dry a little faster than this, and that's what you really don't want. You don't want a contradiction of dryness versus wetness in your clay body. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me and learning how to make crochet or yarn bowl. If it's your first time on the channel, thank you very much for joining us. I will leave all the links to my Facebook, my Instagram, etc. down below if you want to find me anywhere else and see some of my artwork. I love you guys. Thank you for joining me. Remember to like and subscribe, and I will see you Dirty Potters next time. All around me are familiar faces. It didn't even make a sound.